What is ethical wildlife photography? Over the last 135 years in which photography has been around, this is a topic that has consistently come up, and it's a very important topic. It relates to the well-being of the individual animal, the health of an ecosystem, and ultimately leaving a place better than when we visited it. The real beauty is that today we can speak about it. Understanding that we can conduct ourselves in an ethical manner is a massive step forward. When I started photography in the early 2000s, everyone was focused on the technical aspects of digital wildlife photography. They were focused on getting the shot. And you can see how this influenced style. Close-up shots of animals were the norm. And that meant getting close. But at what cost? In this video, I will discuss the ethics of wildlife photography. We would all love everyone to photograph wildlife in a responsible manner that is ultimately ethical. I'll share with you how, over my career of 23 years, I've gained insights and experience in improving my approach to wildlife photography and share these tips of ethics with you. At the end, I'll share hard-earned and learned tips which translate into good ethics, resulting in better photographs. Look out for an upcoming video on ethical cultural photography. In recent years, I spent a great deal of time with the Mundari in South Sudan, the various tribes of the Omo Valley, and also northern Kenya, and I can't wait to share that with you. My name is Shem Kompian. I'm a professional photographer from Africa and co-founder of C4 Photo Safaris. With a camera as my passport, I've been fortunate to travel to every continent on this planet. But Africa remains my muse, with which I love traveling across and sharing with my guests. Today, I'm coming to you from Mashatu in Botswana, a place I particularly love. C4's motto is to share our love of travel, photography and conservation with you. And today's topic fits fittingly to all three topics. If you enjoy this video, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and join the C4 Circle. Let's go back in time. I studied nature conservation in the 90s. This was a formal degree, and their focus then was on managing ecosystems. There was no mention of ethics. And even prior to my study days, in the 70s and 80s, bird egg collecting was legal. Today, of course, that's totally off limits on the ethical scale. But continuing with the chronology, through the 80s and the 90s, private nature reserves in Africa offered wildlife tourism. And it became more popular for guests visiting Africa to spend time in nature viewing animals naturally. These animals habituated, making it easy to view them. And it was way easier to view a leopard than it was 20 years prior to tourism being there. Importantly, most people used binoculars to view wildlife in the 90s. Cameras were the retreats of a select few because they were cumbersome, they had long lead times to see a printed image. But then the 2000s hit. And with it, the advent of the digital camera. Consider the Sydney Olympics, where Nikon used a professional digital camera for the first time. Within seconds of the 100-meter final, the winning image was teleported globally to London, ready to be printed in the newspapers. It was groundbreaking, and the surge in popularity of digital photography is very well documented after that moment. There was a gold rush. All of a sudden, millions of people were taking up photography, which had become now oh so accessible. Binoculars on game drives went out the windows and in came the camera. With that came a change, and that change was behavior. Because now on safari, guests were coming to Africa to photograph animals. They had no idea of how to behave, nor what to consider, but they had a camera and they wanted to get close. Before we address behavior, I want to tell you a story. When I started photography back in the year 2000, everyone was focused on the technical aspects of digital wildlife photography. It was very much focused on getting the shot. And you can see how it influenced the style of that generation. High impact imagery, where sharpness of every pixel could be peeped, was the norm. Contrast, clarity and sharpness were just like exactly what people were looking for. But there were exceptions. And these are the people who I learned from. They were the masters who had been around photographing for ages. People like Angela Scott, Thomas Mangelson, Franz Lanting, Art Wolf, they photographed wider and told stories with their images. But why did they do that? Because they knew that conservation imagery, which is images that told stories and placed animals in the wider context of their environment, made a stronger overall impact than a photo focusing on the eye of a leopard. Because ultimately, they were and remain conservation photographers, which means they were thinking about what they were doing and leaving a place in a better situation than before. They were the original ethical photographers. Ethical tourism and responsible tourism means thinking about the consequences of your actions as a tourist on the environment, local people, and the local economy. C4's mantra to our guests and our guides is to leave a place better than when you found it. If we start with that approach, you are starting with the right mindset when coming on a safari to Africa. To us, being in nature is an experience that is way beyond one animal species. It's about broadening your mindset and gaining an understanding of how everything is connected, from which we can appreciate how small we are and grateful for our role in the ecosystem. Chasing one species can often mean that you are blinkered by desire, and with that can come harmful behavior. So here are some pointers on approaching ethical wildlife photography. First, I will discuss the broad approach, and then I'm going to discuss the on-the-ground approach. 1. If a tour operator you're working with promotes an ecosystem over a specific species, then you are onto a good operator. 2. Book with a responsible safari tour operator or a lodge that is responsible to the whole environment. These operators ensure that the areas and lodges that you visit are acting responsibly, giving back to the ecosystem and also the communities. For example, Mashatu, where I'm standing right now, is the largest employer in the region outside of the government. They make sure that they employ all local staff, and it shows. The people who visit love Mashatu, and Mashatu loves their people. They also have a very strong youth program that gives back to the youth and brings them up through the system to potentially work at a place like Mashatu in the future. 3. If a lodge or a tour operator mentions that they practice a community outreach program, research that they actually do. 4. The same goes for researching if lodges and operators really do support conservation organizations. I find it best to support on-the-ground conservation organizations, where wildlife is directly affected positively by you visiting the lodge. 5. Watch out for ethics washing. Don't fall for the phrase that we get you as close as possible to the big five, or predators or large animals. Don't go for the thrill or the entertainment. Rather look for a place that wants to give you an experiential experience, one that advocates for the protection of the ecosystem. If a lodge or an operator promotes a wilderness and a sense of nature, you are working with the right company. 6. And lastly, Africa emits 3.5% of global carbon emissions. You, traveling to Africa, pays for the protection of that land, which is one vast carbon and biodiversity sink. Is there not a more ethical way to spend your money and your time? Now, onto the real practical tips on how to behave ethically when photographing wildlife. 1. It's never ever worth causing an animal to change its behavior in order to get a desired photograph. The reason for this is that all animals give away telltale signs of being disturbed or even distress. This, of course, never translates into a good photograph. It's in no one's interests to try and alter an animal's behavior by calling it, whistling, or any other odd behavior. Witnessing animals relaxed makes them more relaxed, and then they naturally present a better gesture and posture. Think about when you photograph a young child, how they sometimes stiffen up and pose for you. Neither is desirable. You want a relaxed and candid photograph. 2. If the animal is very relaxed, there's a great chance that that animal will exhibit some behavior, like feeding, hunting, socializing, or other. This translates very nicely into good wildlife images. It gives you a much higher percentage chance of getting a good photograph, because the animal has now moved from doing nothing, like sleeping, but to being active. And that means interaction, action, all sorts of other opportunities. Patience is the key here. wildlife photography for the last 100 years, patience is the key. 3. Let the animal come to you. If you're in an underground hide, like the one we have here at Mashatu, then the animal comes to you of its own accord, and it is coming into your space, relaxed, confident that you won't do it any harm. Of course, photographically, there's a massive upside too, as there's eye contact, natural behavior, and that makes for wonderful photographs. So I hope I've shared some value for the ethics of wildlife photography with you. For me, it's important to be aware of the larger picture of choosing the right operator to work with, and then behaving responsibly when you are in the field. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to look at Janet Klein's video on tips for first-time safari goers, and also her conservation interview with an anti-poaching manager. Thank you for watching, and remember that we want to leave the place we visited better than when we arrived. Goodbye.